So we have a very trained audience for your talk. So I think, Felix, that's a perfect audience for you. Kick it off.
Perfect. So before we get started, I didn't plan on doing a live demo, but we talked for a second, so I tried to at least
if it will fail, everything goes on me, right? The whole shame, that's what we said.
I just realized that we have a few environments that are probably not needed anymore, so I just delete the branch and hope that afterwards the environment is gone as well, but we'll check that at the end of the presentation. Cool, so before we get started, I'm really glad to have this talk after Lenka because I'm also here to showcase some community projects and how to get started with Argo, Workflows, Events, and Argo CD. You probably don't need to jumpstart with Argo CD because you're already using it. And how we used it to build pipelines for building our applications that are powered by GitOps. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the objectives we had. First of all, because we've already using Argo CD for configuring our clusters, deploying our applications, we also wanted our pipelining tools and everything to be managed by Argo CD. Obviously, we wanted every code change to be built and tested for every branch. And because we are having a lot of Java applications who rely on Postman integration tests, we also needed ephemeral environments, so we can have those in our build pipeline and tested them as well. And whenever we are done with a feature and delete the feature, we want this environment to be gone as well, because otherwise we are just using our Kubernetes resources, which, if you can pay for it, is great, but you probably won't. And we wanted our workflows to be reusable, configurable, being able to manage Gradle builds the same way as we manage Maven builds, having this support for different versions and everything without having to build tons of workflows or having hundreds of parameters. Cool. So the first step is we need to trigger our workflows. For that, we are using Argo Events to actually start our build and deployment processes. And Argo Events, basically from an architectural point of view, looks like this. So we're having our event source, basically listening to some kind of external event. It could be a Kafka message, or in our case, a GitHub or GitLab trigger. The event source then just writes the event into a persistent event bus, usually backed by Nets and Jetstream. And then we have sensors connected to this event bus, consuming it, filtering it in case, and triggering our workflow. So if you're an engineer like me and you love YAML, that's how an event source looks in YAML. It's pretty simple. We just have the information of the repository, an endpoint where it is exposed. So our Git provider can send the payload there. Then we have an ingress, and we're listening to all the events. Cool. Now to the sensor. Sensors are pretty great because they can also filter according to specific events. And you don't have to photograph everything. In the end, I have a QR code with a Git repository link with all the examples and a lot more to get you started on your Argo journey. So in this case, we're listening to every push event, branch creation and deletion, but we also had some applications running on GitLab. GitLab does not send you any information when a branch gets created or not. And therefore, we can use a hacky workaround by checking the commit checksum after or before this push. And in this case, if the checksum after the push is just the row of 0 values, the branch got deleted. So we can actually transform the payload before doing something with it and just add an event name delete, and then we can know in our workflows that we need to trigger something. And then we have the trigger, which is part of the sensor. The important part here is just we are triggering an Argo workflow. We're adding the event we are getting from our Git provider into the workflow, and then the magic will happen. So far, everything is manageable with Argo CD. We can act on different events, and version everything. That's pretty nice. So Argo Workflows, we somehow need to build our applications, and therefore we use Argo Workflows, which basically is comparable to your Jenkins, your GitHub Actions, more GitHub Actions than Jenkins, because every step is executed inside a container. It has extensive templating support. Remember this will be very important later. And we have basically two custom resources. One are workflows. Those are the running instances, so your actual running build processes. And we have workflow templates and cluster workflow templates, basically namespace scoped or cluster scoped templates that can either be a single step inside of your build pipeline, or it can be a template for your whole build process, which references your build step templates. In action, it can look something like this. We have a checkout, we're building our application, we're building the container image, we're generating some test reports, static code analysis. Always important to scan your image for known security vulnerabilities, update our Argo CD application as a part of our build process. And this leads us to actually Argo CD, which we are using for deploying our application. The next slide is probably irrelevant for most of you, because you already know how Argo CD works. But basically, we have Argo running inside of a cluster, configured to watch a deployment, configuration, repo, however you want to call it. Just be nice and not let it be your source code repository. And this is our actual desired state, and Argo syncs this desired state into a cluster, so we have desired state equals our actual state. So I'm also skipping over applications. You already know how this looks like. You know that this is how a Helm chart looks in Kubernetes that this application is connected to. Maybe think about also deploying some Prometheus rules, alerts with the application as well, so you can test out changes. And now we can put everything together. We have a developer pushing source code, a webhook goes into Argo events. We're filtering whether this event is something we want to act on or not. And if it is, we trigger a workflow, and one part of our workflow execution is updating the deployment repository with the new image tag. So we are deploying the application we've just built. That's cool, and it works perfect for applications that are already deployed, but we are not having the ephemeral environments yet. So for that, we can use application sets. Basically just a way to tell Argo to generate applications based on a generator. In this case, I just added a new feature branch, and our workflow added this little list element, and we are deploying a new environment into a cluster. Basically, this looks like this. We have the push of a new feature branch, triggering the CI workflow that we've seen earlier, because it takes longer usually than the create workflow. And this workflow creates a namespace inside of a cluster. It creates the corresponding Kubernetes manifest by copying the source directory into a new one and adding to our application set. And then, so we don't have to wait for the deployment, just spins up the Argo CLI to actually tell it to sync right now. And if we delete the branch, basically the same thing happens, just in reverse. Cool. That's already a lot. However, if you know Jenkins, multi-branch pipelines, Jenkins files, you have the possibility to upgrade your Go version on a branch to test your build before actually affecting other workflows or pipelines. You can update your Maven version, your Gradle version, your JDK version. Argo events workflows doesn't have something like that built in. And it's been a pain not having the option to test JDK upgrades before actually rolling it out. So now we could build another workflow or send a parameter inside of the sensor, but that would affect every workflow for this application. So we decided that's no good. We just build our own Jenkins file. So we implemented we call it workflow descriptor, which allows developers to specify common parameters for the build. It even goes so far to let them say it's a Java application, a Go application, which JDK version, what type of build is it, and a lot more. You can even disable security scans if you want. If you really need this hotfix to get through, for example, don't do that. But yeah, so now, before actually triggering our build workflows, we are running some kind of meta workflow that actually just, in case of branch creation, deletion, same thing as before, because there's not a lot to configure there. But if that's not the case and it's a normal push and we need to build our application, we can check out the workflow descriptor, reading the values, and then configuring the actual build. And this happens by the templating. This is where Argo Workflows really has the magic happen. So here, for example, our build step calls a templated template. In this case, it would be, if you remember from the previous slide, Maven operations, insert the configuration it needs, and then this step configures itself, basically. And we can also see here the Maven operations call an image, again, based on variables that a developer can change for his branch inside of the descriptor. And as long as the image exists, you can then build your application with a different Maven, different JDK version, or Gradle stuff if you do it like here. And that's how we achieved some flexibility. That's basically it with my presentation. Thank you. There's the QR code with the Git repository. And if it's true, we should see a delete workflow. Yeah. Yeah, this feature we had before is gone now. And what's also great is you can have custom Prometheus metrics for your workflows. So you can have your workflows in a usual Grafana dashboard. You can combine it with Loki logs. You can use your alert manager for your build notifications and stuff like that. Yep. Any questions?
So thank you a lot. You not even made a demo, you even made it perfectly in time, even including the demo. So yeah, let's jump to the questions. Obviously you explained everything so well. Or you brought so much content that people still...
a lot.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I have a question for one of the last slides. You said there were some inputs based on branches. How do you provide those inputs?
So basically, this is the configuration file that we check out from the branch. We know which branch we are on because our Git provider sends it in its payload. So we clone repository, check out this workflow descriptor, and then we parse it and input it in the actual build workflow.
Okay, so maybe I'm understanding it wrong, but if the feature branch gets merged, then those inputs are different for the main branch, or how?
Well, if you merge it, then obviously those changes are also in the main branch, and from then on the main branch gets built with those parameters. But usually you're not making a, I don't know, change in your Maven version just on one branch if you don't want it, after testing it and seeing that it works also in your main branch.
So you still have to make sure after testing it you commit the previous state. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Cool.
Here we have one.
Why did you decide to run with Argo Events and Argo Workflows over a standard CI/CD provider like Jenkins or GitHub Actions?
We have something in our company called Learning Friday, and it started out as we've seen this cool thing and we wanted to tinker with it. So we sat down a couple of Fridays, implemented part of the system, and it felt really nice, and decided to just keep going with it, especially because we have the possibility to just point our cluster configuration, Argo CD, to a repository, which then deploys all our sensors, all our triggers, all our workflows. We have the possibility to easily roll back changes just by having Argo managing it. Yeah, it just felt great, and Jenkins is awesome, but it can also lead to plugin hell, configuration hell. Yeah. I don't want to run it inside of Kubernetes. It probably needs privileged access for building containers, and here we're having user namespace builds. We're using Builder for building the applications and images. We don't need any root users inside of our containers, and it just felt more cloud native in a way than Jenkins. But we're also still using GitHub Actions for some small applications. So,
okay, thanks.
Any further questions? Now it's your chance. Okay, then I think Felix, anyway around. Thanks a lot again. It was really a nice talk. It was really a nice demo, which actually even worked out. So really cool. And yeah, thanks a lot.